Okay, so Rick Hanson, PhD, is a psychologist, and he's a senior fellow of the Greater Good Science Center at UC Berkeley. And he's also New York Times bestselling author of a number of books. His books have been published in 29 languages. And I want to tell you about the most recent, which is Neurodharma. And the subtitle is New Science, Ancient Wisdom, and Seven Practices of the Highest Happiness. Isn't that awesome? So I just want to say this book comes with the highest recommend. I mean, Rick is incredibly passionate and it's really contagious. And you will find there's so much inspiration and brilliance, really. It's a powerful offering. So high recommend. There's a link in the sidebar and you can get the first chapter free along with 3 guided meditations. So check it out. So Rick began meditating in 1974, and I'm grabbing that piece of information because so did I. And Rick, I didn't know that. We started the same year. We're really contemporaries. And he loves the wilderness and taking a break from emails. Well, me too. So I just grabbed a couple of things I thought were fun and we have in common. But my more informal heart welcome is that Rick is an incredibly wise, bright, good-hearted being. So I know you're going to love him, and I know you're going to love this evening with him. So welcome, 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 my friend. So glad that you're doing this. And we need you unmuted in order to hear you.
Great. Yeah, well, thank you, Tara. You're a major benefactor of mine. And one of the keys of that, which to me is a real teaching, is that you opened doors for me with tremendous encouragement and validation that were life-altering, career-changing. I would not be here today, honestly, if you had not stepped in several times and opened those doors and kind of nudged me through them and beckoned me onward. And I just want to thank you for that. And for me, it's a lesson in the things that might seem relatively easy for us to do that can be game changers for other people, particularly using our positions of authority or power or privilege to help other people in ways that just are transformative. And you've done that for me again and again. You're just such a good heart. I always feel like I'm in the present of like a wise witch. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, from like the 23rd century, just beaming in, you know, sprinkling fairy dust on us all, drawing us into your slipstream of transmission. So, okay.
Well, with that, I'll exit gracefully. Maybe I'll get my broomstick and off I go.
It's really sweet and good. Zoom, zoom. Thank you. Thank you.
Blessings.
Take good care. Bye-bye. Okay, so I feel very honored, truly, to be able to be here with you all. And what I hope to do is follow Tara's general schedule by moving into a meditation shortly. And then after it, and a little bit of a break, a few minutes worth to catch our breath, maybe quickly use the bathroom, come back and I'll do a presentation, a kind of a talk that'll have a fair amount of little experiential practices in it. That relate to the combination of calm and compassion, the combination or the territory of strength with heart, which is useful at any time. And I think in particular these days, useful in turbulent times, including times in which there's a fair amount of conflict sometimes with other people. So how do we actually do that? Grounded in the growing scientific understanding of what's actually happening in the living body as we cultivate qualities that we experience in our heart and our minds. What is actually happening in the living body when we feel grounded, stronger, more present, and more open-hearted and more generous, while still, if need be, being assertive and speaking truth to power. How do we actually do that? So that's what I hope to explore with you, including taking questions and comments, both in the chat sidebar in Zoom and in person. So let's begin. This meditation will be about 25 minutes or so, and it'll have three parts to it. I'll say as little as possible, while also giving you some guidance, some pointing out instructions that hopefully will be of use to you. Throughout, feel free to adapt my suggestions to whatever is good for you. Find your own way into the experiences, the ways of being that we'll be exploring here. To begin, find a posture that helps you be comfortable and alert, perhaps with a sense of uprightness without any kind of strain or tension, a sense of dignity, even, a feeling of, yes, I can be here. As a kind of prelude to this meditation, I'd like to read an offering from Thich Nhat Hanh. To meditate means to go home to yourself. Then you know how to take care of the things that are happening inside you, and you know how to take care of the things that happen around you. Meditation is a kind of homecoming, coming home to the body, coming home to the present, coming home to all of who we are. Coming home to a grounding in this earth. Sense of connection with the land, the sea and the sky. Connecting with our ancestors, with other people, native people who walked this land before us. Coming home. With your eyes open or closed, being aware of your body. If it's okay with you, being aware of your breathing. So in the first part here, we'll focus on three kinds of breaths. First, breathing while feeling your chest as a whole. Aware of the left side of your chest and the right side of your chest, and left and right together. Breathing while feeling your chest as a whole. Next, breathing while feeling caring, keeping it simple, maybe with a hand on your heart or aware of sensations around the heart, bringing to mind one or more beings that you simply have friendliness toward, or compassion, or appreciation, or love. Focusing on the feeling of this, keeping it simple, breathing while feeling caring. And next, breathing while feeling cared about. This could be a little more challenging. Again, keeping it simple. What's it feel like to be with someone who cares about you, who is warm toward you, includes you, takes you into account, someone who maybe appreciates you, is friendly toward you, maybe likes you, maybe, perhaps loves you. Keeping it simple, maybe with a hand on your heart. Dwelling in the sense of breathing while feeling cared about. If your mind wanders, that's natural. Simply come back to the feeling of being cared about, breathing while feeling cared about. And then in the second part of this meditation, which will become less and less active and quieter as we proceed, opening into a sense of open hearted, contented peacefulness, the sense of your heart being open, present and open, with a feeling of thankfulness, a sense of there is enough, knowing you can still have goals, you can still solve problems, you can still have big dreams, grounded in a sense of enoughness already, grounded in a sense of feeling content already, open hearted and content, seeing if you can get some sense of this that you can dwell in. Perhaps with a simple sense of thankfulness and gratitude. And if you can't find this sense of any kind of contentment, it's okay. It will gradually come. Open hearted, grateful, contented, peacefulness. I'll be quiet for some moments now as you gently allow yourself to be drawn increasingly into a sense of open hearted, contented peacefulness, in which there is no need for strain, no pressure, no contraction, nothing to gain, nothing to resist. Breathing in, breathing out. Open-hearted, contented peacefulness. gently opening into a growing sense of ease. Already basically okay. In the core of your being, feeling undisturbed. There may be pain, there may be sorrow, yet in the core of your being, you can feel open-hearted and content and at peace. And then in the third part of this meditation, letting go of any focus on any particular thing, letting the sense of calm abiding simply be present, and increasingly be aware of spaciousness. Simply spaciousness, awareness opening out in all directions, letting go of doing, letting go of doer, and resting in simply being. Being aware, simply being. Now we'll take a brief break, just a few minutes. I'll turn off my camera and microphone during it, 5 minutes, let's say, and I'll come back at 5 minutes past the hour, and then we'll explore what might have been going on inside your brain while you were doing that meditation, and also what could we cultivate inside ourselves, and how could we cultivate it to rest in this place of open-hearted strength with other people for their sake as well as for ourselves. So I look forward to seeing you in just a few minutes. We'll start again in just a minute or so. I might be doing this a little differently than from how Tara does it, but I'll kind of sort of follow her path here, and it's a good path. If you have comments or questions, you can feel free to use the chat sidebar. All you have to do is push the chat button at the bottom of the screen, and then you can type into the sidebar. You can send me a comment or question that's private. No one will necessarily see it if you just direct it at me, or you can direct it at everyone. If you send me a question or comment privately, I won't use your name. But if you send it in such a way that everyone can see it, I may respond to it by using your name. And in my own sitting group, which is about to start in 45 minutes here on the West Coast in California, we have a kind of general encouragement in terms of the sidebar, if you are going to use it, that you focus on your own practice and questions and comments that will serve you in your practice, not criticizing or advising others. So just a thought. I suspect Tara has some kind of similar statement. Okay, so come on back. You're here. And so for those of you who joined us during the meditation, I'm Rick Hanson, longtime meditator, psychologist, and someone with a lot of interest in deep practice, including practice informed by actual embodiment, objective embodiment. In other words, how is the body making the mind moment by moment by moment in ways that we can use, informed by and guided by and inspired by the great wisdom traditions of the world. During the meditation, those little practices are informed neurologically, and the general discussion of sort of what might be going on in the hardware underneath the hood I explored in my book here, et cetera, that Tara was kind enough to acknowledge. And so I won't go into it in depth right now. I'll just say that when we tune into our bodies and get a sense of our bodies as a whole, that does multiple good things. It tends to quiet verbal activity because we're focusing on sensation. Also, as soon as you bring awareness to the internal sensations of your body, that acts like a kind of circuit breaker and reduces activity in the default mode network, so-called, toward the midline and the back of the cortex, which is sort of where we go when our mind's wandering, we're caught in thinking about the future, regretting the past, caught up in our resentments or grudges against others, the ruminator, as it were. Well, tuning into the internal sensations of your body acts like a circuit breaker. So it reduces that kind of default mode activity, thereby bringing you into the present and reducing, mental time traveling and negative rumination that tends to be saturated with the feeling of me, myself, and I. That's pretty good right there, being aware of breathing while feeling your chest as a whole. And also, for example, when we tune into the feeling of caring and being cared about, that tends us to bring us into a sense of relatedness and also an awareness of the heart area, which, among other wonderful benefits, just to give you an example of why that works, engages the vagus nerve complex. There will be no midterm on any of this, fear not. And that vagus nerve complex has two branches, both of them originating in the brainstem. One heads downward, it's the more ancient one, regulates our heart and lungs and the viscera, and it has a kind of soothing, calming, centering, grounding effect. And the more recent branch of the vagus nerve complex goes upward into the face and the eyes and the inner ears, and it's very involved with what's called the social engagement system. It helps us relate to other people in wonderfully developed human ways. Well, when we draw upon the sense of warm-heartedness, flowing out or flowing in, either way, we start to engage the first, or the second more recent branch of the vagus nerve complex, because it's a social experience, which then sends signals rippling down into it to calm the heart and lungs, kind of the visceral core of the body. And also, as we have that sense of warm-heartedness, that's a primal signal of safety. Since as our ancestors evolved in small hunter-gatherer bands in the Serengeti Plains and during Game of Thrones as well, oh boy, the sense of being connected with others, whether it's caring flowing out or caring flowing in, that is a primal signal of safety. So just that simple practice with those 3 breaths to introduce this basic idea of using the mind to change the brain and body, to change the brain and body for the better, to benefit our own mind and all other beings. It's remarkable, isn't it, that simply 3 breaths, right? Breathing while feeling your chest as a whole, breathing while feeling caring, and breathing while feeling cared about can have such an effect. That was the first of the 3 parts in the meditation. And then in the second part, and I'm just kind of explaining here partly what we were doing and why, the more that we can rest in the felt sense that's authentic in the core of our being, whatever pain or anger or fear might be swirling around the edges, but the more that we can rest in this sense in the core of our being of needs met enough in the present. It doesn't have to be perfect. And there may be future challenges, and maybe in the present needs are not really met enough. But to the extent we can locate a genuine, authentic sense of an enoughness of safety and satisfaction and connection, then we can, we deserve to, we kind of earn our rest in an underlying sense of peacefulness, contentment, and love. And as we deepen that resting, that dwelling in a sense of needs met enough already, the sense of an open-hearted, contented peacefulness, well, we gradually hardwire that felt sense literally into our nervous system, into our body, so that increasingly we develop this unconditional core inside of that, which reduces the ancient machinery of craving. Because craving, as the Buddha clearly laid out in his drive theory of suffering that anticipated Freud by 2,500 years, craving biologically in an embodied way is grounded in a sense of something missing, something wrong in the meeting of our core needs. So to the extent that we can authentically rest in the feeling of needs met enough so that in the present we feel undisturbed and open, well, there's little or no actual basis for craving. And then, understandably, it follows that suffering and selfing tend to reduce as well. That's what I call the green zone, where you just kind of rest in a genuine sense of open-hearted, contented peacefulness. And the more the more that we dwell in an experience, the more that those qualities dwell in us. And the more that through the way the brain changes over time with repeated experiences, we can turn states into traits. As we repeatedly experience states of open-hearted, contented peacefulness, we develop these qualities as traits, increasingly woven into our being with us wherever we go. And then on the basis of that cultivation of beneficial traits, that fosters them as states, as experiences, which gives us another chance to reinforce them in a positive cycle that propels an upward spiral of growth. That's pretty cool. And then in the third part of the meditation, following a kind of a classic trajectory of meditative guidance, first we sort of steady the mind and we stabilize. And then we help ourselves increasingly quiet and feel okay, develop an equanimity in which the fuel that drives the fires of craving is reducing, falling away. And then on the basis of that equanimity and that presence, we gradually make less and less effort inside our own mind. The efforts start falling away. There's a growing sense of spaciousness, and we start increasingly having a sense of being the mind as a whole, awareness included, simply being with doing falling away and the doer. And we abide in open awareness, resting in awareness itself. That's kind of a progression. And I went for it. I thought, well, okay, I wanted to introduce some practices here, and I hope it wasn't too complicated. I appreciate, 45 minutes of complete silence, sometimes when I meditate myself. But on the other hand, I thought you might be interested in these as methods, skillful means, any one of which you can draw upon whenever you like, including in everyday life, to support yourself. So that was the meditative portion. And I'm going to take a quick peek at some of the comments already coming into the sidebar, which I appreciate. And I want now to start moving into a talk of sorts, which will be interspersed with some brief experiential practices to keep it alive, and so that you can get a feeling for what I'm talking about here. And I want to explore, as I've said, the combination, the coming together of a feeling of open-heartedness and caring, while also having a sense of calm strength. And it's relatively straightforward if you think about it. To be compassionate or loving, friendly, may not be always easy, but it's pretty straightforward. On the other hand, or also, it's pretty straightforward to be determined, firm, tough, blunt, clear, mean business, place for that. But to bring them together, to integrate compassion and assertiveness, to integrate a fundamental lovingness that radiates in all directions while being crystal clear about what you're dealing with, whether it's across a dining room table or in the halls of power. That's not so easy to do. So I want to talk through several specific practices that could support that, and then I'll open it up for some discussion because I can see already this is going to be a very rich discussion here. that in which I'll also invite some of you, if you like, to raise your own question or comment with me directly, and then we'll talk about it. Okay, so far? All right. So on the one side, calm strength. Multiple things we can do. I want to call out two that I find very practical that also are grounded in the underlying ways in which our physical bodies work. The first is for calm strength, to be aware when it's true that you're basically all right now in the present. Now, sometimes we're not. Sometimes we've experienced a shocking loss. Sometimes we're in great physical pain. We're overwhelmed. We're not basically all right. And I've been in wilderness, and I've one of time, and one sort of which was underwater, and I nearly drowned one time. And I've been in serious situations, and sometimes you're not all right. You just really are not. Okay. But much of the time, there's enough air to breathe. The heart is still beating. We're not in overwhelming pain. We haven't suffered an immediate shocking loss. We're basically all right, except we tend to not to be aware of that fact because Mother Nature has helped us evolve. And back in Jurassic Park, back in the Serengeti Plains, the creatures, including early humans, who were super chill, just kind of looking around, feeling really mellow. It's all good. Just be here now. Look at the light on the water. Oh, this is really cool. Phew! Chomp! They got eaten. They were not nervous enough or cranky enough or paranoid enough to really pick up on the slither in the bushes nearby. So the ones who survived tended to be anxious by nature and cranky and irritable. And now their great grandchildren, like us, are on top of the food chain with nuclear weapons. So there's a tendency in us to have an ongoing trickle of anxiety that doesn't actually have any objective basis when it doesn't. And also, continually, the body is telling the brain that you're basically okay when you are. Most of the signals coming into your brain originate from inside your own body. And usually, as they flow up into the brain, including to ancient regions like the hypothalamus, which is a very primary regulator of the body, and our response to stress, those signals coming into the brain from the body, that the heart is beating. You can do it right now, that there's enough air to breathe. No shark is chewing on your leg in the moment. Your kid is not about to run into the pathway of a bus in the present. We can tune into those signals. We can highlight them. What normally happens is we habituate to them. We get used to them because they're the background noise. So we tune them out. But actually, most of the time, the body is telling the brain, like the calls of a night watchman, all is well, all is well. And this is extremely useful and kind of radical to come into the present, to listen to the truth when it's true, when you actually are basically all right now. And in the recognition, the felt recognition of that feeling, that truth, letting go of delusional anxiety, letting go of unnecessary bracing or guarding, knowing that you can still be aware of what's happening around you. You're not becoming a chump or a sap. You can still protect yourself and others. You can still do things that help you be safer, but without paying the price of unnecessary fear, apprehensiveness, uneasiness, worry, anxiety, even panic or terror. Don't have to. Really quite radical to appreciate that we can meet our needs for safety without also paying the price of unnecessary fear. So I invite you now to get a taste of this if you like. This is an extremely good practice if you work with other people to help them realize that they actually can feel when it's true, all right in the moment. It's important to be aware that You don't have to lower your guard. You can still be aware of what's happening around you. You can still be strong, still be determined, while internally feeling at peace, internally feeling calmer. So if you like, we'll just do it for a minute or so. See if you can be aware of the feeling of being basically all right in the present, right now. And see what it's like to dwell in the sense of this, being basically all right now, and letting go of unnecessary anxiety. I'll do it with you for the next minute. With the sense of basic all rightness could come a feeling of relief or reassurance. Okay. That's one of my favorite practices because it brings us right into the present, and it helps us confront the ways in which we often add the second and third darts, if you will, in the Buddha's metaphor. We add unnecessary anxiety in the present. And it's so helpful to continue to remember we can still be strong, we can still be clear without feeling tense and frightened. Now, I want to just mention again, I developed this material a lot in my books and other things. You can see tons of freely offered resources on my website, rickhanson.net. And I'm going to put it in the chat sidebar again. It's at the very top. If you scroll up, if you, as Tara said, if you go to click the link there, you can go to my website and get the first chapter of my book for free and some 3 guided meditations, one of which actually draws on this feeling all right now there. And I think I'll type that also into, calm strength. I think it's one of the first practices. I'm seeing Elizabeth here at 523. So I'm going to put that link in again. Bingo. And you can check it out there. Okay, one more. I'm going to keep clicking along because I want to make sure I have plenty of time for questions and comments. Another thing that can really support the sense of calm strength, and then I'm going to get to the open heart in a moment, is to tune into what Antonio Damasio coined the term somatic markers, probably a familiar term to therapists here. So this is the felt sense in the body that's associated with one thing or another. Now, we can have somatic markers. The felt sense, as I did as a kid in school, very young, going through school, skipped a grade and have a late birthday. And I'm kind of by nature sort of shy and dorky. And I was like, don't hurt me. That's a somatic marker right there. Okay. I wouldn't call that a positive one, although it did help me survive, junior high school. On the other hand, there are somatic markers of calm strength. Like, for example, you might like to sit up a little straighter. What's the feeling in your body? Not some kind of posturing, some sort of macho posturing, but a feeling of dignity, self-respect, gravity. What's your face look like when you're determined? Maybe you could start by thinking about being determined on behalf of others. That might be more accessible for you, the felt sense of that. What are the bodily components of that feeling of strength? Dignity, gravity, determination. Loyalty. What does loyalty feel like in your body? And you can apply the somatic markers of strength on behalf of others, loyalty to them, being an ally to them, sticking up for them, coming through for them. You can apply that same feeling to yourself, being on your own side, being for yourself, not against others, but for yourself. And you can also draw upon, we can also draw upon, I definitely draw upon the feeling of strength more generally, like being in wilderness, for me, off trail, rock climbing, boom, 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 feels really good, really vital, really potent. Maybe it's holding that yoga pose that last little bit of time, or exercising in some way, or doing anything for you that feels strong. A form of calm strength, a form of feeling strong, in terms of the somatic markers of it, the sense of it in the body, is endurance, enduring, the very important form of strength, one that's often underestimated. Like standing by the side, as I did, of an aging parent's hospital bed for long hours to, help your parent, even though your feet hurt and your back hurt and wasn't fun. You were going to hang in there. The feeling of that in the body. Well, these are things we can draw upon. We can tune into those somatic markers. It's basically a form of body memory, implicit memory of sensation and patterns of typically subtle tension or muscular activity. It doesn't need to be tension, but there's a sense of muscular activity that underlies that. And as we get in touch with that and ground in that, that becomes increasingly where we stand. What we dwell within increasingly is what dwells within us. So tuning into that felt sense of calm strength again and again is a way to really anchor it inside yourself. Okay? So on to an open heart. And again, these are not exclusive. They're more than these, but these are, to me, real useful, practices. I tend to be a practice person, interested in pragmatically what might be helpful. So open heart. I want to really underline the third kind of breath I did, breathing while feeling cared about. We're deeply social beings, and it really helps us to open our heart to those who are difficult for us if we feel the sense of others caring about us. It doesn't have to be perfect relationship, but there can be a sense authentically of others caring about us. And I think of 5 different ways to feel cared about that kind of increase in their intensity. Minimally, a sense of feeling included, that you're part of a group in the present or in the past, people who care about the environment like you, part of a team at work, maybe a sports team, maybe like me, you're a fan of the Golden State Warriors, although they've been circling the drain for a couple of years now, basketball, professional basketball, or you're part of a group of friends or a family or a couple, or you and your dog, you're together, you're included. You can also have a sense of feeling seen by another person, even if they don't agree with you, empathized with, they want to understand, even if they don't understand you fully, seen. Third aspect of feeling cared about is to feel appreciated, that you're respected. You may not be their friend, but there's respect for you. There's valuing of you. They picked you maybe, or they look up to you, or they appreciate you. They're grateful to you for something. You're appreciated, genuinely. Fourth, of course, feeling liked in all kinds of ways, including in everyday casual ways. I think about, the hot dog vendor or the person at the coffee place, something. There's a chat, there's a back and forth. It's friendly, not best friends. Okay, it's not more than what it is, but it's not less than what it is. There's a friendliness there. It's interesting that the root of the word for loving kindness in the Buddhist tradition is metta. And the root of the word metta is friendliness. And loving kindness can sound kind of lofty and out of reach, but friendliness, simple friendliness, is certainly accessible to us. So Can we feel like we're on the receiving end of friendliness, of people who like us? And then, of course, feeling loved, feeling cherished, feeling loved. Particularly if these were a thin soup when you were young, as they were for me in certain aspects, it's especially important as adults to look for authentic opportunities when we are included or seen or appreciated or liked or loved. And then when we recognize those facts, open to the feeling, open to a feeling of those things, which then we help to sink into ourselves. We take in the good of that experience so that it increasingly dwells within us. And we can use today these practices to fill what, for me at least, landing in adulthood, felt like an enormous hole in the heart, a big, empty, gaping space that as adults, though, again and again and again, thousands of times, a dozen seconds at a time, we can take in the good and gradually fill up that hole in our heart. And then, which really helps us have more open-heartedness and compassion and forbearance and forgiveness for others, including for others who are difficult for us. Also, really important, second kind of practice for open-heartedness is expanding the circle of us. You know, the fact is that until very recently, humans for 300,000 or so years, and then our tool manufacturing hominid ancestors for a couple million years before that, and then their primate ancestors for another 30, 40 million years before that, lived in small bands. The way we live today is deeply unnatural. You know, humans lived in small hunter-gatherer bands until agriculture came along, which enabled larger collections of people. Towns, cities, empires, nations, 7.5 billion humans now on the planet. So our tendency is to cooperate strongly with us, the band of 40 or 50 people we spend most of our life with, while typically fearing and dehumanizing and aggressing upon and exploiting and attacking them. We have those two capacities inside us, sometimes metaphor, sometimes represented through the metaphor of the two wolves in the heart. And so a lot of research shows that as soon as we start making a distinction, a division between us and them, in group, out group, trouble starts to begin. Fairly quickly, we start moving into dehumanizing them. And it's a fast track to prejudice, discrimination of all kinds. Therefore, it's particularly important to keep working with the category and keep looking for ways to find a sense of common humanity, even with those we disagree with. We can compete with us, we can have conflicts with us, but the sense of usness regulates and reduces the worst that humans are capable of. And it's easy, actually, again and again, as practices. It takes some effort, but to do it again and again, of gradually expanding that circle of us, deliberately looking for ways that others, even those we disagree with intensely, politically, like me, you will die someday. Like me, you enjoy chocolate. Like me, you want your children to be happy. Like me, you wish your children would take your advice. There's a sense of common humanity. And as we gradually train through practices of compassion and kindness, formal and informal, we can actually expand that circle of us. And we can be very watchful for and mindful of that tendency to see divisions. So that's a second practice that can support this opening of the heart. And then to finish here, when we bring those together, I'd like to talk about two kinds, really, of discernment. First kind is kind of at the macro level, where we see whether other people are actually committed to the two fundamental principles of any healthy relationship, whether as two friends or a whole country, telling the truth and playing fair. Is there a fundamental commitment to those basic criteria or not? Is the other person talking in good faith or not? Discernment. Are they trustworthy? Are they someone you can actually negotiate with in good faith or not? Will they keep their agreements? Do they intend to keep their agreements? Will they grant you the same principles that they take for themselves? Do they really think that rules for you are also rules for them? Do they really think that rights for them are also rights for you? There is discernment. There is discernment kind of at the macro level that's appropriate. And then based on that discernment, we see what we see, we value what we value, and we plan what we plan. Whether, again, it's with another person that we're working out who's going to do the dishes on even numbered nights, or, how are we going to manage our public affairs? At the micro level, additionally, there is the deep penetrating insight into what's called the emptiness of phenomena. And this is very important, where we have insight into the ways in which all of our thoughts, all of our experiences, and most of the phenomena out there in reality, out there around us, are impermanent, made of parts, and interdependent with everything else. So that in the technical sense, all experiences, including our righteousness, I speak from experience here, my righteousness, our positions, our sense of self, even, all of that is empty in the technical sense. It exists emptily. It is empty of solidity and absolute self existence and fundamentally ownership. And when we look out in the world, we see much the same thing. We can see others as swirling processes. We can see movements and policies and issues as more like clouds than bricks. And as we acquire and deepen in through our training, our contemplative training and our insight over time, as we recognize the foamy emptiness of so much of the phenomena that we solidify and essentialize and go to war with or try to claim and possess, there's less weight in our heart. We're rested much more in wisdom, and our footprint on others doesn't weigh so heavily. Okay. All right. Well, I want to make time. We have over 20 minutes now, which is good. For all of this. And I've seen some of the comments coming in, already. I think what I'll do is focus on a number of them, and I'll try to be kind of quick and succinct and make time for at least maybe a couple of people to really talk here. Okay? Okay, great. So let's see, I'm doing a quick scan. Great question. So this is at 5:15. Alicia, if I'm mispronouncing your word, I apologize. Elisha Blackburn, to everyone. My question today, how can I cultivate empathy for others at times when I feel that my own emotional needs are very strong and unmet? I'm thinking of my mom, who didn't meet my emotional needs as a child. I really feel for her and the pain that is deep within her, but my own pain continues to show itself. I am working at feeling my own grief and tending to my real and valid needs. Do you have insight or encouragement about a path forward that will help me to have empathy for her as I continue to spend time with her and often feeling uncared for, and also allow my own needs to be as big as they are? It's a deep question that has a lot of implications for so many of us. And I'll just try to offer maybe a couple of reflections here that may be of some use here. So it's wonderfully hopeful that we can take in today lots and lots of different kinds of social supplies that are genuine from other people that can gradually help to fill much of the hole in our heart that's been left by what was missing or what was bad, the absence of the good and the presence of the bad with key people like our own parents or other key people in our lives. That's really good news. It's not the whole pie, but it's slices of the pie that we can repeatedly internalize with other people. And every day gives us a handful of opportunities a breath here, half a minute there, occasionally longer, with other people in which we can truly internalize their empathy for us, as well as other aspects of the way they care about us. That's wonderful. And I would really offer that to people. And what's really interesting is that as we actually take it in, we cling to it less. As we truly internalize these wholesome, beneficial experiences, we crave them less because they're increasingly present already inside us. So that would be one thing I would really stress. And as we do that, in everyday life, that can help us, be more functional and more equanimous, more even keeled with people that are particularly triggering or challenging for us. Second, it's really helpful to appreciate that compassion for them, right, which does require empathy for them. Compassion involves at least two, if not three qualities. We have empathy for suffering, we have benevolence toward it, and a movement to help if we can. Compassion for, let's say, a mother or anyone else in your life who's been difficult for you, compassion for them, you'll just kind of notice as you find it. It doesn't mean agreement. It doesn't mean waiving your own rights, but it actually protects you and feeds you to rest in compassion for them. It actually reduces our reactivity to them and our vulnerability to being re-triggered by them, re-traumatized by them, to have compassion for them. Now, you may need to kind of look way past the personality or underneath it to like a sense of an inner being or an inner child or that other person as a little kid to really locate a genuine compassion for them. But when you do, you'll notice, I think, that it's a lot easier to be with them. And then third, I think there's this balance in which we're balancing duty to other, duty to self. What is our duty to an aging parent? What is our duty to another person, particularly if they're if they're incapacitated with dementia or something else? And also, what is our duty to ourselves? What is our duty to ourselves? There's a lot of teaching in the Buddhist tradition about that could be summarized in the present day in the metaphor of put your own oxygen mask on first. And so this is where people strike different balances based on their ethics and values. But there's a real question here, at what point do you feel like you have fulfilled your duty? Or this is enough to another person? And at what point do you need to honor to a greater extent, perhaps, your duty to yourself? And sometimes in the real world, we need to reduce our output to others to have more capacity for input into ourselves. And then we make that call. But we make it with clear eyes. Truly, what is your duty to her? What is your duty to yourself? When you try to balance, to what extent do you want to make yourself vulnerable to forms of mistreatment still, or just, some kind of inappropriateness, unskillfulness from her coming your way? So I just offer that. Okay. Maybe one more person from the sidebar and then reach out to other people. Well, I see Katie as a Rogers at 543 in the sidebar. Thank you, Alicia. Yeah. What about if we've been abused by them? What is our duty to others, duty to self? It's a real balance. And, the Buddha, I think, I'll just make the point that you may know about already. He said for wise speech, there are basically 6 criteria. 5 are mandatory in a sense. 1 is desirable but optional. Speech is wise, that is well-intended, and we could broaden this to conduct toward others. Well-intended, actually beneficial, true, timely, and not harsh. These are required, as it were, and if possible, wanted. And sometimes the truth is that the other person doesn't want what we have to say. And still, balancing duty to self, duty to others. We may cut off contact from them. We may remove them from office of high power, even when they don't want to go. We may say things to them that are going to make them uncomfortable. We may pursue justice in different ways, but we weigh it in terms of duty to them, duty to self, and the broader consideration of compassion and not letting hatred and ill will poison our heart. Okay. So who wants to talk? Anybody want to talk? Christy, I think you're the moderator. You'll help me out here. You want anybody wave your hand in the screen or push the button that puts your hand up? Anybody want to do that? A focused question or comment related to what we're covering here. I'm going to try to steer clear of politics, but obviously there are a lot of implications there we may get into. Anybody want to bring up something? Who? Are you calling on someone, Christy?
I am not right now. We had a question earlier from, let me scroll back here.
Mm-hmm.
8:12. Ambika,
Mm-hmm.
if Ambika is still on, we could get her question in.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I see it.
Hi, I'm here. Yeah.
Excellent. I see your question, Ambika.
Thanks, Rick.
Do you want me to read it out loud?
Yeah, that would be
Okay,
great.
that'd be efficient. Okay. Hi, Rick. Thank you for the session. Sometimes I find my underlying self-talk while meditating to be negative, like, ugh, stop thinking about other stuff. Why can't you do this? And that internal struggle between trying to stop my thoughts, not being able to, and scolding myself for it sometimes just makes me feel worse than before meditating. Yeah. Any thoughts or tips? I know meditation is supposed to be an observational activity where you observe instead of judge, but I have a hard time with that. That's great. Did you want to elaborate, Ambika, or is that kind of sufficient there?
Yeah, I think that's sufficient. It's just as soon as I try to start meditating, I just feel like all of these kind of negative, judgmental thoughts
Yeah.
show up,
Yeah.
especially when you start thinking about other things. I'm like, why can't I stop this from happening? So it's
Yeah.
hard to stop that. And then I almost feel just overall negatively about the whole experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's a lot in what you're saying here, and please let me know if I wander off, being actually useful here. So a couple things. One, there are different kinds of meditation, and some of them have to do with just as best one can, kind of toward the end of the meditation I guided, open awareness, just sitting, spacious awareness in which we're simply present with what's streaming through awareness. That's a definite kind of meditation. There also are meditations that are more about cultivation practices, where we're seeking to develop things inside ourselves, seeking to develop compassion, kindness, or as I did earlier, kind of the green zone sense of equanimity, kind of a luscious equanimity in which we're resting in a feeling of open-hearted, contented peacefulness. That's cultivation. So just want to say that first. And sometimes it's helpful to start with cultivation practices, including cultivating steadiness of mind, like just staying with the sensations of breathing, or really tuning into the feeling of your chest as a whole or your body as a whole as you breathe, and cultivate that for a while. It's like developing a resource inside, so that then when you're more open into the whole field of consciousness, it's quieter and it's not so annoying, and those voices at the table are not yapping away quite so much. That's one part. Second suggestion is that when we keep refocusing awareness on body sensations, especially internal body sensations like of breathing, naturally those voices tend to quiet. Because as I said, we're highlighting sensation over verbal activity, and we're tuning into internal sensations, which kind of quiets the default mode network. And so what you might do is sort of just let them yap away, and almost like whatever, the feeling of the air flowing in, the air flowing out. Yap, yap, whatever, air flowing in, air flowing out. It's sort of like the background noise is there, but it gets quieter and quieter as you primarily are doing this simple practice of concentration, of shamatha, could be called, of absorption, where you're just becoming increasingly absorbed in sensation. That can really help. And then more broadly, to me, your question is a wonderful way into the sense that in some ways inside ourselves, we could get a sense of ourselves as like having three major parts, in which there's the sort of beleaguered self, then there's this attacking part, and then there's a nurturing part. And often what we try to do is defend against the attacking part, the critic you're talking about, criticizing you, blaming you, shaming you. And often that critic is an internalization of critical, shaming, or dismissive, kind of exiling voices. Get out of here, you're second class, go away. Sorry, hopefully that was like a trigger warning. I should have offered a trigger warning there, but anyway, that might have been too real, all too real for me. Anyway, point is, we internalize that, we take it in. We're designed to learn, especially to learn from negative experiences, especially negative experiences when we're young, especially negative experiences when we're young that involve other people. That is the brain's negativity bias. That makes it like Velcro for bad experiences, but Teflon for positive ones. So it's understandable. And then alongside that, huge kind of Darth Vader, character is a kind of small inner nurturer. It's like, oh, don't hurt little Ricky or Ambika or whatever, And so in a way, what's actually quite useful is to not resist initially the critic, just disengage from the critic. Don't feed and follow the critic. Don't ally with the critic, but especially grow those inner nurturers, the caring committee inside, through repeatedly internalizing, which involves positive neuroplasticity. So you really are growing the circuitry inside yourself of that inner nurturer, which includes guidance. It's very important. We can guide ourselves skillfully. The Buddha was full of guidance without attacking, shaming, and tearing down. We can be more skillful. We can install correction. We can realize, okay, that's how to be more skillful going forward. We can recognize the high road distinct from the low road without paying the price of tearing ourselves down. And in your caring committee, I think there's a caring committee. Maybe there's a part that is kind of like a firm coach. I've had my guides while rock climbing, quit whining, Hanson, and start climbing, whatever. But they're not mean about it. They're encouraging. They're funny about it, right? They're guiding. And also parts that are very sweet, parts that are enthusiastic, parts that are cheering you on. These are all elements we can internalize into our caring committee. And as we grow that, then the balance of power starts shifting. More and more, we've stopped reinforcing the attacking voices. We have them, which is distinct from being them. We disidentify from them. Maybe we give them a bit of a funny name. Maybe we imagine them with like a funny hat on, something like that. We distance from them. These are classic techniques, while also especially empowering and building up the caring committee. And over time, those attacking voices will get quieter. It's really okay. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Rick. Helpful.
Okay, good. And then if you can, Ambika, this is more advanced, but available to all of us. What's great about the Buddha is he laid it all out for everybody. There was no secret teaching, right? It's like I said, that last form of discernment at the micro level, where we discern the cloud-likeness, the foaminess, the emptiness, the insubstantiality of that critical voice. When you look closely at it, we don't need to solidify it, because when we solidify that critical voice, it has more power. But if we recognize that it's made of many parts that are not actually so true, it comes and it goes. It feels more like a cloud, a swirl, than a collection of stones being thrown at us. And that can be very helpful. That's vipassana, that's insight into the empty nature of all experiences, positive and negative ones alike, but certainly the empty nature of that critical voice. All right.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, maybe another person. I saw a hand, Marina Hood. Yes?
There. Hi, Rick. Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, Great.
Thank you. I'll just read you my question that I put on the chat. It just said, what is the best way to create that feeling of spaciousness, openness, awareness itself? In part 3 of your meditation, do you use visualization to get into that spaciousness? Because that's a little challenging for me. Like I can feel myself sitting on my chair and I know that I'm in my home office.
Yeah.
So I don't know how to work with that. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. And by the way, to everybody, there's wonderful advice and counseling guidance, sharing, spiritual friends in the sidebar. So you might want to check that out, including that build on things I've said. Okay, so it's great. A lot of teachings about spaciousness, especially in the Tibetan tradition, like the sense of the sky, the sense of vastness. A very cool little neurological hack is to extend your gaze to the horizon line, if not above. When we bring the gaze closer, it's more so-called egocentric in visual processing because it's naturally self-referential. Is it going to eat me? Can I eat it? You know, friend or foe? But if you move your gaze out, you're more in a sense of things as they are, impersonally, less sense of self, naturally a sense of spaciousness. And with the eyes closed, you can even get a sense of just lifting your head slightly. That'll tend to foster that sense of spaciousness a little bit. Also getting a sense of the body as a whole, going into that feeling of the gestalt. The right hemisphere for right-handed people is involved in that sense of things as a whole. That naturally moves us into spaciousness rather than left hemisphere-based activity, which is analytic, breaks things into parts, and then operates on them sequentially. Thus, the basis for language in the left hemisphere. This is switched for a lot of left-handed people, but the principle's the same. So point is, when we get a sense of anything as a whole, the body as a whole, maybe the room as a whole, the bird's eye view, the panoramic perspective, the whole enchilada, all the causes and conditions, woo, you know, that naturally moves us into spaciousness. And then technically, you can get a sense increasingly, this is explored in the practice of being wholeness, where you kind of abide as consciousness as a whole, in which many things are bubbling away, but there's an ongoing sense of it as a whole, including the element of awareness. And that's a natural kind of spaciousness. You have a sense of awareness without bounds, extending in all directions. That's spacious. And increasingly, there's a sense not so much of you can witness the spaciousness, then that's dualistic, but it's okay. It's an intermediate step. And then increasingly, there can be a sense of being spaciousness, or being the space, being the whole. Good stuff. Okay, great. Katie or Daniela or both, and then we'll move to a wrap. Daniela, anybody want to call on them? Can you unmute Katie
Hi.
or Daniela?
Rick, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Rick. Thank you so much. I haven't read any of your work and I haven't listened to any of your meditations. I have been experiencing a lot of despair lately, and I've been trying to reach out and connect with like a meditation community and do something live. So this is kind of my first time doing that. I guess I'll just defer to, I think it was my first question, and my brain's kind of racing right now, which it tends to do. So I can't remember exactly what my first question was. There was a lot of chat going on. So if you could just refer to that one, that would be great.
Do you know when you put it in?
Hold on.
About what time? And while you do that, I'll just say welcome. And you've
Thank
come to a
you.
good place. Tara, for me, is wonderful. What a combination of deep practice, psychological background, smarts, heart, funny, real, committed to social justice deeply, you know.
Yeah,
I always listen to Tara. I can feel like my mind's starting to evaporate in a good way. So yeah, come on back. Yeah.
So it looks like it was 1806, which I'm not good with military time. I don't know, 606, right?
And your kid, I see it. So you wrote I had a hard time feeling cared for. Yes, very common. And also feeling what I think I should feel with regard to those I care for. Really got into my head with thoughts about this, mostly negative. Okay, so I get that. And I'm really glad you brought that up, Katie. So first, anytime we do a cultivation practice where we're trying to get something going, it can be a little risky because very often what will happen is the brain will rapidly associate to the negative opposite of what we're trying to get going. We're trying to find forgiveness, let's say, what comes up is resentment. We're trying to find a sense of strength. What comes up is our history of feeling overpowered, understandably, and let's say weak. It's very natural. So it's a little tricky. That's why I think it's helpful when we do cultivations to start with simple things that are undeniable, that we can kind of dwell in, stay with, and then build out from there. First point. So second, very understandably, to feel cared about can be very, very hard for people who don't have much history of that. Or in that history, there were maybe betrayals, so that opening it all to feeling cared about can feel quite risky, because then it opens us into longings, which then lead to disappointment and trauma again. Understandable. So that's why I think with regard to those 5 aspects of feeling cared about, we fill up that hole in our heart. We rehabilitate ourselves. We heal ourselves. We tend to ourselves. We tend and mend, right, to ourselves in small ways that build up over time. That's why I think looking for ways to feel included that are undeniable, like you're part of this gathering tonight in a very simple way. It's not more than what it is, but it's not less than what it is. Looking for ways to feel people who appreciate you, or like, yeah, that was a good idea, or something. Or at work, there's like a sense of camaraderie, maybe grim humor about what a maniac your boss is, but there's a sense of common cause there. That's a sense of belonging. That's gold. It's like we're thirsty. That's water. That's an oasis. Drink. Really important. Again and again and again. And when that happens, over time, that will actually grow, because we're designed to learn. There's an inherent neurobiology of learning, but we have to stay with the experience. We have to take it in for a breath or longer, usually, before it has a chance to sink in. So letting it sink in. That will build up your capacity to feel cared about, and the body memory of it that you'll carry with you. And then in terms of caring about others, again, we locate what's authentic for us. Always very important. But sometimes there are things that are a bit of a stretch. We know in our mind that we don't like them at all. We think they're complete jerks. But the truth is, if if they were trapped in a car that would something, we would do what we could to pull them out. Like we'd be committed to the principle of justice based on our moral nature and our reason, even if we don't have particularly kind feelings toward that other person. So we locate what we can. And then we build from there. And I'll maybe a last little point about this is that it can also be helpful to relate to this territory in this way, to ground in the sense of your own naturally good heart. Yeah, could be anger in me. There's vengeful thoughts, and it could be there. But underneath it all, fundamentally, it's like a naturally caring heart, and naturally kind of radiating. And we cultivate it even over time. We train. There's a training dimension here, which is hopeful, right? we can grow, we can heal, we can develop, and so the feeling can be you're resting in your own good heart for your own sake, out of self-respect and dignity, that kind of radiates from you, and other people move through it. And like a Wi-Fi base station, radiating in all directions, they move through it. So your good heart is not about them. It's about you. And you may judge accordingly that you don't want to have anything to do with them. You want to call the cops. You want to, file a complaint. You want to stay far away, whatever it might be. But your fundamental radiant lovingness, kindness, friendliness is not contingent on who moves through your field. That's something you can grow in. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. It's been helpful to me. Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Oh yeah, that's great. I mean, honestly, and we can have a sense of other people. Here's a really important thing, I think. Like, I don't know you, right? I think.
No,
Right?
you don't.
Yeah. And yet here we are, honestly, without any big deal. I can see that you're a basically good person. It doesn't have to be a saint. We routinely can recognize that another person is a basically good person without flattery, without anything about it. Just true. We just recognize it. Other people are having that recognition of us as we move through their awareness. And if they can recognize that quality in us, and we can recognize that quality in others, can we recognize it in ourselves? And that's one of the last taboos, I think, to be a stand for the felt sense that you indeed are actually oneself is a basically good person, that there is basic goodness, inalienable, unconditional goodness in you. And to recognize that in oneself and to feel that and stand in that. That's a real.
Thank you for recognizing that. I get all kinds of messages on a daily basis that I'm a good person. I have good people in my life. There's no one in my life that is harmful or seeking to do me harm. But I grew up with a lot of neglect and abuse and messages that I wasn't good and I had to prove myself and be perfect. And so those messages oftentimes are much stronger than what is actually happening in the present moment in my life now that I've cultivated and built this life to have positivity and good people and good things. But a lot of times the past overshadows that. It's frustrating. So recognizing that when you said that to me, that you saw that in me, I actually could feel that in myself. So I appreciate that recognition ignited something in me. So thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. You touched me to receive. We want to feel received, don't we? By other people. Yeah, that's great. That's a gift to me that you received me. I thank you, really.
Good. Thanks.
Well, we're approaching an end. I want to Daniela, I'm definitely going to go to you. We'll be wrapping up. Before we do that, though, I just want to speak to what Katie and I and others have been talking about and quote Milarepa here, the great Tibetan sage, who described his own life of practice when he looked back on it as, in the beginning, nothing came. In the middle, nothing stayed. In the end, nothing left. In the beginning, nothing came. In the middle, nothing stayed. In the end, nothing left. And I think that's the process. In the beginning, we try to feel things, and it's like lighting a fire with wet wood. It just doesn't come. In the middle, we can actually have experiences based on our inner practice, deliberately maybe, or something someone's talking with us about. But it isn't yet a trait. It's not yet woven into our being. But with repetition and with practice, eventually it becomes who we are. And then it doesn't leave us. It is how we are, or what we can get in touch with readily at will. And we can apply that both to the broader life of practice and to the healing or cultivating of any particular thing. I find it really hopeful. Okay. So Daniela, finishing here with you. Do you want to unmute yourself? Great.
Oh, hi.
Hey.
I'm so happy I tuned in tonight. My sister's on here too, and we're just feeling sisterly gratitude for arriving here. My question had to do with equanimity, which for me is a very obvious and very, very, very effective antidote for internal distress. But it requires a little bit of like a dulling or a dissipating or a moderating of the potency of the suffering in order to alleviate it and feel all right, like a sense of I'm okay. Yeah. And I'm wondering what happens to all the positive feelings, the really heightened ones and the magical ones. exuberance. I don't know if ecstasy is the right word, excitement, all the big feelings that you actually want to feel like in their full potency, and not have them be dulled, diluted, zened out.
Right. Yeah. I'm hearing, correct me please if I'm wrong, two things really in what you're saying, two kind of related questions. One is, in the moment when we're flooded, how do we find equanimity? And then a second question is a good one, and it's a great personal interest, and it's kind of controversial in the contemplative traditions. How do we find equanimity and the beautiful benefit of it without numbing out or suppressing ourselves or denying the body, giving up the value and the wonderfulness of passion and delight and joy and exuberance and all the rest of that, including the aspects that are involved with social justice. How do we?
All the fire. Like I think I'm okay. I'm not saying I'm good at for the two questions. Number one, I'm not saying I'm great at it, but I sort of get it, and I'm trying all the time. I can kind of feel it, what it's like to have equanimity in distress. I'm not sure what to do with like the ambition, the fire, the passion. Like where does equanimity fit into
awesome
that?
Question. Yeah. Whew. Well, let's see here. There's so much we could say about it. I'll say it like this. Well, think of our three major needs for safety, satisfaction, and connection. And the Buddha distinguished between tanha, which is craving, and chanda in the meeting of those needs. Chanda is wholesome desire. So it's okay to have wholesome desire, like for safety, to want to protect yourself from others who are attacking you or protect those you care about. That's okay. That's different from getting caught up in the craving that's based on the sense of something missing, something wrong, that's saturated with fear or anger or a sense of powerlessness or all the above in the meeting of the need for safety. For example, I've done a lot of rock climbing where it was physically hazardous, but, and I was a little nervous around the edges, but deep in my core, I was having a great time. I knew what I was doing. It was within my skill level. There was a good rope on me, and I trusted my partner, and I was able to put pieces of protection in, et cetera. So the point is, just because there's a challenge to our needs doesn't mean we have to tip into the red zone of craving. It's a really important point. We can also similarly, in terms of our need for satisfaction, aspire without attachment, have big dreams, be passionate, be excited, and so forth. Enjoy without tipping into frustration, disappointment, addiction, or drivenness. We can. See, there's a distinction. Now, it's easier said than done because the brain is designed to want what it likes or to want not what it dislikes. And the brain is designed, when I get to connection, to cling to what it feels connected with. So we have to be careful. And I think some people can play fast and loose with this and use their tantra to justify subtler forms of bullshit, frankly. We got to be kind of on our toes about this and keep asking, does this promote freedom and the end of suffering? And is this beneficial truly for other people and ourselves? The Buddha said wisdom is giving up a lesser happiness for the sake of a greater happiness. There might be lesser happiness in short-term forms of craving, but does that foster a greater happiness? And we have to listen to that over time. Same thing with needs for connection. If there's a challenge to our connection, we can meet that challenge on the basis that I've tried to explore tonight of open-hearted strength, the combination of the two. We can meet it with a felt sense of our adequacy already, our worth already, we can meet it by seeing the being behind the eyes of our adversary. We don't have to necessarily meet challenges to connection by feeling ashamed of ourselves or inadequate or less than others, or caught up in the need to impress others or prove ourselves with others endlessly, which I've definitely experienced a history of. Or we don't need to get caught up with the ill will, the us against them ill will. We don't need to let the longing for justice become a craving for vengeance, which for me is very relevant these days politically. See that, again, and that's practice right there. And I find often in my mind, there are these two horses, the horse of craving and the horse of, wholesome desire. And they're both kind of heading in the same direction. And I know there's more going on in my mind than utterly pure motivations. But as long as those negative motivations are generally kind of going in the same direction of the wise and beneficial ones, I try not to feed those horses and just identify from them increasingly, but keep going down that path and increasingly ask myself, what am I here to do? Why am I here? And to keep giving over to and surrender to, and then increasingly be lived by in a way that's felt, be lived by those wholesome purposes, those wholesome dreams, the wholesome gifts. Each one of us, it's true. You have gifts of passion, gifts of delight, gifts of imagination, gifts of creativity. It would be a shame not to actualize those in this life. The actualization of our gifts is a wholesome desire. We can infect it with craving if we're not careful, right? So part of what we do is to disentangle these things so that increasingly we live forward into the next moment, less and less propelled by craving and more propelled by wisdom and a giving over to, the wholesome purposes of our heart.
Well, that was lovely.
Yeah, that feels really real. And then when you look for examples, for me, there's a classic example. I'm going to finish on this. I was rock climbing and I had some goals and they were a real stretch for me. And my friend, who was super goal directed, he said, Hanson, you're going to feel horrible. You're going to fail and feel bad. And I'm like, that's your mind, Bob. That's not me. These goals are so stretchy that it's a win-win. I'll either make them or, if I don't make them, it won't be horrible. And I trained that whole week in climbing and I actually finally made it. I've written about this in little places people can find aspiration without attachment. And where, you might be disappointed if you don't get your goal. You don't get chosen for that job, or that other person is not interested in you in the way you're interested in them. Okay. But you left it on the table, in the sports metaphor, you left it on the field. You went for it with a whole heart. You put in the effort and, you can be at peace with whatever happens. You made your offering. You did the best you could. And you can still be at peace.
If you're already okay, the stakes are lower.
Yeah, that's right. So looking for examples of that. Okay. So officially wrapping up, I think. Christy better, save me here. I thought we could just sit quietly together for a final minute, maybe. Letting it sort of reverberate, letting it sink in, whatever is beneficial for you here. And then Christy, I think, will bring us to a close. I have felt very much your hospitality and friendliness toward me, really, as a group. Comments in the sidebar, seeing your faces, even just seeing the names of people, some I know, if your camera's turned off. So thank you. And thanks, Tara, my friend and benefactor and teacher.
Thank you so much, Rick, for being here. You're one of our favorite guests. We always love having you. So thank you so much for your.
Thanks. One of your favorite
your
subs, substitute teacher, like in high school.
Yes. Thank you, everybody, for being with us. And if you would like to find out more about Rick, you can visit his website at rickhanson.net. And if you'd like to find the links and the registration for this Saturday's satsang with Tara, you can visit her website at tarabrach.com.
Yeah. And I should just add, I put in the sidebar as well. If you're interested in my book or my stuff, there's a link there I put in several times, including at the very beginning tonight, where if you just click it, you can get the first chapter of the book and some guided meditations if you want.
Night, everyone.
Take care.